So at any moment from now, the top court, the Supreme Court, is going to deliver a verdict as far as electoral bonds are considered. A bit of a backgrounder on this. Earlier on Thursday, the Supreme Court reserved its order on a public interest litigation which actually challenged the government's electoral bond scheme for political funding. Now, this is a bench which is headed by CJI, Chief Justice of India, Ranjan Gogoi. He earlier said that they are going to pronounce its order today on this plea which is filed by NGO, Association of Democratic Reforms. The NGO, which has challenged the validity of the scheme, has also sought interim relief, including that either the issuance of electoral bonds be stayed or the names of the donors be made public to ensure more transparency in the poll process. So, at around 10:30, this verdict is expected. It's already 10:33. Nalini is going to be joining us as the observations or the verdict are out in this matter. This is a case which clearly pans out to be Election Commission versus Centre, where EC says that this is going to impact transparency as far as party funding is considered, and the government maintains that anonymity must be ensured as far as the fund flow is considered. So, difficult to track funds flow to parties. So, there's every counter argument. Abhishek, our executive editor, joining us with more. A very strong counter also so far from the government as far as Election Commission's observations on this entire concept of funding is considered and these electoral bonds. Abhishek, over to you. What is expected today?
Sakal, announcement has to come, essential interim order by the Supreme Court on this whole issue of electoral bonds. Yesterday, an argument was made by the Attorney General in which he had said that transparency has been brought in to the extent that the election money is being channelized through banks, that at least some part of the government or at least the bank knows from where the money is coming. Of course, the people still as yet do not know from where the money is coming, but that is not important. That was the argument made by the Attorney General. This was objected to by the petitioners who have gone to court against the electoral bond system which was introduced by the present government. And while the order is not to come as yet, final order, for which I believe sometime in May the court is going to decide, an interim order would come today, revealing Supreme Court's mind as to whether it wants this practice to continue or whether in the present context, given the fact that the elections are going on, the electoral bonds would be continued to be used. This is in the backdrop of the fact that almost 90% of the electoral bonds that have come have gone, 85 to 90% have gone to the BJP, only few to the opposition parties. So that is one other issue which has been objected to, that these bonds are mechanized in a manner that it favors the ruling party. So while a final order would be only next month, but what is expected is in the interim, Supreme Court would reveal its mind whether in the present it should be allowed to continue or not.
Yes, Abhishek, also, the centre vehemently is supporting this scheme, stating that this besides the anonymity part of it, which the centre feels is essential, this is going to really help in clamp down on black money, eradicate the use of black money.
Well, in fact, that was the initial premise for which this scheme of electoral bonds was brought in, Sakal, by the present government. That is going to be a crackdown on black money. It's going to end the use of cash in elections, which ultimately leads to black money getting channelized into elections and thus compromising the free and fair elections. But the opposition has objections to certain lack of transparency in the sense that while the money is being channelized through banks and the role of cash is avoided.
Abhishek, I'm just interrupting you here for a few seconds, Abhishek. And at the same time, requesting you to stay with us on this big story. Our executive editor, Abhishek Kapoor, as Nalini also gets us some breaking inputs as far as the observations of the Supreme Court on this are considered. Abhishek, the Supreme Court has first observed that the issues are weighty issues. Abhishek, Supreme Court calls this weighty issue of tremendous bearing on the election process. The court further observes that court has to ensure that any interim arrangement does not tilt the balance in favor of any party. And court also says that all political parties who have received donations, parties which have received donations through electoral bonds, should submit to the Election Commission details of the donations in sealed cover. Abhishek, what do you make of this? Okay, Abhishek, we'll try and reconnect with Abhishek as Nalini gets us more breaking inputs. Remember, as we speak, the observations we are breaking first on your channel. Sealed covers will remain in custody of the Election Commission of India. Supreme Court has observed that all political parties who have received donations through electoral bonds should submit to the Election Commission the details of the donations in a sealed cover. These are important observations as Nalini breaks us these important information, and Piyush is with us to put this in perspective. Piyush, some very, very important and pertinent observations made by the top court, particularly how this is going to have a larger implication as far as the entire electoral process is considered.
Well, absolutely, Sakal. This is now going to impact the electoral process because for the first time, Supreme Court has come out and they have observed that, we are learning that Nalini is breaking out all the details. She is telling us that all the political parties who have received donations through electoral bonds should submit to Election Commission of India, should submit to Election Commission details of donations in a sealed cover. So that all particular documents, everything needs to be submitted to Election Commission of India in a sealed cover. So it's a big development coming in from Supreme Court. Remember, a petition was filed by an NGO in Supreme Court in which it was asking all the political parties to submit their or to tell to the viewers about tell to the people about the kind of donations which they receive through electoral bonds. Now Supreme Court has observed that all political parties must submit the details of donations which they received to Election Commission of India in a sealed cover. Now it will now further impact the kind of donations the political parties receive, the kind of money flow which happens as far as the elections processes are concerned, because now political parties will have to submit their details of donations which they receive from various sources to Election Commission of India. It will certainly impact the black money, the flow of cash which happens. We have seen before elections also how there were a series of raids on many political parties, including at the premises of close aides of Kamal Nath and also Ahmed Patel. This is now going to impact and also halt these kinds of activities. It will certainly going to impact the kind of corruption which takes place because Election Commission has, Supreme Court has for the very first time has asked all the political parties to submit the details of donations which they receive from various sources to Election Commission of India in a sealed cover. We will be waiting for our colleague Nalini because she is inside the Supreme Court and she is getting all the details first on Republic TV in which we are telling you.
The deadline set by the Election Commission. Piyush, stay with us. Keep talking to our viewers and explaining what this really means. All parties must disclose the details of the poll bonds to Election Commission. And the deadline for the same has been set as 30th of May, which means that these observations made by the court so far, remember, this is the verdict which is being read out as we speak. And Nalini is getting us these breaking inputs, which means that it is imperative, Piyush, on political parties cutting across party lines to ensure that transparency is maintained and all these details have to be furnished to the apex body, the Election Commission of the country. Because remember, the very first observation by the court was that it has to be objective, it has to be balanced. There doesn't have to be any tilt towards any political party. No favoritism whatsoever.
Well, exactly. Supreme Court order goes to all the political parties, cutting all the political parties. And that's why Supreme Court has asked every political party to submit their source of donation to Election Commission of India in a sealed cover. Remember, we have told our viewers how an NGO had filed a petition in which it was clearly mentioned that all the political parties must furnish the details of donations which they receive. And now, with the plea which was filed, Supreme Court has observed that all the details must be given to Election Commission of India in a sealed cover. Central government had also submitted its reply to Supreme Court on this very plea, in which it has said that there is no need for the for the people to know about the source of donations. But looking at that, Supreme Court has now given a verdict.
Let's talk to Nalini. Nalini, what's the bigger takeaway from the observations made by the court?
Well, Sakal, it needs to be remembered exactly how the Chief Justice of India started pronouncing this verdict. Because he said that either way, whatever the Supreme Court decides on this particular issue is going to have a very large significance on the electoral process of the country. Which is why through this interim order, they're trying to ensure that the balance of favor does not tilt on either side of the party in this entire case. It is for that reason that they have specifically asked the political parties to give out all the details of the electoral bonds and the funds received through electoral bonds till 15th of May 2019 to the Election Commission in a sealed cover. Now, how this helps, Sakal, essentially is because not only does this allow for the Election Commission to keep a check on exactly where the donations are coming in from to the political parties and exactly how much donations they're getting, but also the fact that the political parties will not have to disclose out into the public the source of their donation. So there is a check on the authority, along with the fact that there is also some sort of relief for the political party, which was essentially the Supreme Court's idea that they don't want the balance of favor to be tilting on either side in this entire case, which is why they've gone ahead and done this. Yes.
But this is big when the poll commission says that you will have to disclose the details. We'll have to disclose the details in order to ensure transparency, utmost transparency and objectivity is maintained in this matter. As Nalini and Piyush continue to stay with us, we're talking about big takeaways. Remember, Nalini, over to you, especially on that point when the court says that the balance has to be maintained, the objectivity has to be maintained, and it has to be ensured that there is no tilt or any sort of favor towards any political party.
Well, Sakal, there's absolutely no doubt about the fact that whatever the Supreme Court decides on this particular issue is going to have massive ramifications on the electoral process. That is exactly even what the Chief Justice of India stated before pronouncing the verdict today, that if the Supreme Court rules on either side, it will have ramifications. It will have ramifications not only on the electoral process, but on the entire concept of funding for political parties, which is why they've essentially said that they don't want the balance of favor to tilt on either party's favor, considering the fact that it's only an interim order as of now, and the Supreme Court is still yet to hear the final arguments on merits on this entire case. So as an interim measure to provide some sort of relief not only to the petitioners and the Election Commission, but also to the political parties, is why the Supreme Court has gone ahead and passed this balance order. Now, essentially what they've said in this order is that all of the fundings that have been received up till May 15th of this year, all of the details of that need to be submitted by the political parties to the Election Commission of India, and this needs to be done in the sealed cover. Why in a sealed cover? Because that way it ensures that this Election Commission is able to keep a track of exactly how much funds are coming in and through what modes these funds are coming in to the political parties. And at the same time, the political parties are also not obligated to disclose this information out into the public, and neither can the Election Commission do so. So there is an entire concept of check and balances that the Supreme Court has imposed on the electoral bonds now through this interim order that has been passed. Now, essentially what will happen before the top court is that the Supreme Court will begin hearing the final arguments in the case on merits itself, and during the pendency of these arguments, this interim order is going to stay in place, which means that even for this election season, all of the political parties will have to disclose at least to the Election Commission in a sealed cover envelope exactly how much funds they have received through these electoral bonds and from what all sources these funds have come in. So there is definitely a check on electoral bonds that the Supreme Court has imposed on the political parties, and at the same time the argument that was being made by the Attorney General that the political parties have a right to privacy and the voters are not entitled to know exactly where the funds are coming in from has also been kept in mind by the Chief Justice of India by specifically
Nalini, that argument bit that was put forth by the centre, that anonymity must be maintained. And remember, the centre also talked about the fact that how this is really going to help in terms of curbing the black money. How do you look at that? How do you look at that point?
Yeah. Well, the anonymity aspect of it, Sakal,
we have Majid Memon, Nalini. Nalini, just stay with us. Majid Memon, NCP leader, joining us on phone line. Majid Memon, Your first response to the observations made by the top court, where it is imperative on the political parties to disclose the crucial details, including the bank accounts, to the ECI in a sealed cover, though this will not be put in a public domain.
Well, Supreme Court is trying its best to minimize avenues for corruption and to ensure that, as assured under the Constitution, polls, such polls like Lok Sabha polls, important polls, must be conducted in a free and fair atmosphere without being influenced by money power or any other such thing. But then, you see, our system has got so many loopholes. And in the year particularly, the government had a ploy that, well, under the guise of this scheme of electoral bonds, they could legitimize the receipt and expenditure of huge funds, huge monies for elections, and thereby encourage corruption in the proceedings of the poll. And I think some kind of a break is now put up by the Supreme Court, which in fact even Election Commission could have done. Election Commission by itself, of course, 2 years ago had written about it, but Election Commission did not consider it as a matter of grave importance.
Will your party welcome this? Is your party welcoming this this verdict?
We are bound by. You see, we
okay,
are bound by the orders of the
just
Supreme
to understand this. Okay, go ahead, sir. Please go ahead. Okay, so I think he wrapped it up by saying, Nalini, that we are bound by the order, which means, in fact, all parties are bound by the order. That there is no ambiguity on it. Nalini, over to you a bit more about what does the court mean when it says that the further discussion requires lengthy hearing. So this doesn't stop here. We'll have more observations in near future, more to come.
Well, absolutely, Sakal. The case is yet to be heard on final arguments and on final merits before the Supreme Court of India. This is only an interim order, which means that it's an order in place only during the time that the case is pending before the Supreme Court of India. While the case is being heard, while the arguments are being heard at length by the three-judge bench, there needs to be either a stay or no stay on electoral bonds. So clearly, through this order, there is absolutely no stay that has been imposed by the Supreme Court on electoral bonds or issuance of electoral bonds itself. But at the same time, they have put in a measure of checks and balances by asking the Election Commission to take care of and to understand the details of exactly where the political parties are getting their funding from. Yes, Sakal.
Yeah. So basically, the ECI ensuring, the top court ensuring that there is an absolute transparency, at least in this part of the electoral process. That is something which is maintained. Thank you very much, Nalini. We're going to come back to this story and come back to you in a bit. We need to take a short break here on Republic TV this Friday morning. Stay with us, viewers.